have to believe. You have to believe. Believe.
This morning, we're introducing you to an Army officer turned Paralympian in 2004. Melissa Stockwell became the first female American soldier to lose a limb in the Iraq War.
That's been Melissa's trademark. To have an American flag is always part of her prosthesis, extremely patriotic.
I think grit is getting through things that you never expect. These obstacles that come your way, but finding a way to persevere through them. Having the heart to accept it, to move on. Instead of finding the things that went wrong, you find the things that went right. Where did it bring me? Well, it's brought me here.
You have to believe that the training you have put in is gonna create the outcome that you want.
As I was finishing the course, I was thinking that I'm 44 years old. I'm a mother of two that are in the stands. It's my 4th Paralympic Games, and I'm 5th in the world, and I'm really proud of that.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Melissa Stockwell.
Thank you. Thank you. On April 13th of 2004, I woke up that day with both of my legs, and I went to sleep that night with just one of them. If any of you have a to-do list like I do every day, I can promise you that that was not on my to-do list for the day, not something that I really wanted to check off. But that's kind of the beauty of life, is that you never know what it's going to throw at you until it does. And I knew that my chosen profession as a military officer had its risks, but you never think that something like losing a leg is going to happen to you until it does. And in a moment, I'm going to share with all of you that story. But first, I want to thank you for having me here today, for taking the time out of your morning to come here. And when I saw the list of authors and my name was on it, it was this very surreal moment of, oh my gosh, I'm a part of this. So thank you for taking the time just to come and hear my own story. And I do just have to point out that this is extra special. My dad has flown in from Atlanta and is here to surprise me. He wasn't supposed to be here this morning, but I see him out there. Stand up, Dad, wave. That's my dad. So you will hear a few stories about him as well. But the goal is when you leave here today, so let's say you go to other events this afternoon, you go back tonight to your hotel, your house, whatever it is, your head is on your pillow as that you think about what we talked about here. It's a preview of my own book and how we all have the power of choice to live the life that we want to live. So I like to say that I was born a patriot, a lover of our country from a very young age. And as I grew older and I saw military personnel with their uniform on, they were in the community, they were on TV, they had a flag patch on their shoulder, and you could just tell the pride that they had. So whenever anyone said, what do you want to be when you grow up? I always said, I wanted to be in the Army. I wanted to wear that uniform. So my story eventually led me out to the University of Colorado in Boulder. And freshman year, I saw these Army ROTC cadets marching around campus. And you can just tell that they were part of a team. So sophomore year of college, I was basically an Army ROTC recruiter's dream. I marched into his office. I said, I want to join the Army. What do I do? He's like, well, you're going to sign these pieces of paper. So I signed 100 times on these dotted lines, handed them back. He gave me my very first military uniform, went back to my dorm room. I put it on and just knew that that's what I was supposed to do with my life. So I don't come from a military family. My parents, they knew of my desire to be in the Army, but I think they kind of thought it was a phase I was passing through, because to them, why would their youngest daughter actually join the Army? So imagine their surprise when sophomore year, I dialed up my mom and my dad and I said, guess what? I'm wearing my uniform. I'm an ROTC cadet. I'm going to be commissioned as an Army officer. And there was kind of this awkward pause. Dad, not sure if you remember this. And my dad, not quite knowing what else to say, blurted out, "Are you sure that they allow girls in the Army?" So it was this unknown world that we were all diving into together. But of course they do, and I fell in love with it. I got to go around campus with my fellow cadets and sing Army cadences. I got to learn military history, battle drills. I got to paint my face in mud and roll around in it, and I loved it. And then senior year of college, a day came up on the calendar that truly changed our world. September 11th of 2001. And if you recall, this day, it was a Tuesday. And like every Tuesday in college, it was ROTC day, which basically meant I woke up, I put my uniform on. On this specific day, I went into campus and we watched the horrific news unfold on TV. And it was this day that our instructor looked at all of us and he said, "Today, your lives, they're gonna change. It's not a matter of if you'll deploy to a foreign country. It is more a matter of when." So that uniform that I was so proud to wear on American soil, I knew I'd probably be wearing it on foreign soil as well. But first, a few months later, I was commissioned the day I graduated from college as a brand new Army officer with my once skeptical but now very proud parents by my side. And they sent me off into the wide world of the military. So you fast forward a few years to the fateful day of April 13th, 2004. I woke up in Iraq, put on my uniform, bulletproof vest, Kevlar, and we got our briefing for the day's mission. This specific day was really not too different than the other days over there. The big difference was when I got into my Humvee, into my vehicle, instead of sitting next to the driver, I was sitting behind the driver. My job was to do a ride along, to learn the route, because the next day I was gonna take over for that route and I had to figure out and learn where we were going. So right before we left our little forward operating base, this soldier ran up and he said, ma'am, would you like me to put a pedestal mount on the side of your door?" So a pedestal mount is what you see here, and it is what my leg ended up resting on the outside of the vehicle. It's something that wasn't needed, but it made things a little bit easier for me to sit there. And I said, "Sure, let's put it on." And it's a reminder years later of these little choices that you make in your life and the difference that they can make in the long term. So our vehicle left the gate of our forward operating base, and a few miles into the ride, there was this bridge that we had gone under many times, kind of like an overpass. You wouldn't really think twice about it when you're driving. Our vehicle went under this bridge and there was just this deafening boom. There's black smoke, the smell of metal. I look up and the windshield is crashed in and the woman in front is yelling, "IED, IED, we've hit an IED," which we all knew meant our vehicle had been struck by a roadside bomb. We swerved to the left, we ricochet off of a guardrail, we swerved back to the right, and we end up crashing into this woman's house. The other soldiers did exactly what they were supposed to do. They got out of the vehicle, they surrounded it, they're pointing their weapons out to assess the situation and to think about what they should do next. So I started to do just that. I took my seatbelt off, I looked over, I looked down, and I knew something wasn't right. There was a lot of blood. So I called out, "I'm hurt, I am hurt." And lucky for me, there was a combat medic trained in field first aid a few vehicles back. He heard me. He rushed up, he pulled me out of the vehicle, and he laid me there on the sands of Iraq. And at the time, I had no idea the extent of the injury. There was a lot of commotion going on, but I couldn't tell what was happening below my waist. Nobody was telling me. And it wasn't until that medic put the tourniquet on and started to tighten it down, where number one, the real pain started, and number two, the realization that whatever was happening here was not the best situation. And seeing this picture a few days later from my hospital bed, in a newspaper called the Stars and Stripes, and realizing that that was my vehicle, that was a windshield crashed in, that was my own blood. A vehicle that was once really hard to look at. But this many years later, looking at this picture, thinking about how far I've come, the power of the human spirit. But it was hard to believe that from this moment, just 1 year earlier, I was at my very first Army duty assignment, Fort Hood, Texas, part of the 1st Cavalry Division, brand new Army officer, 23 years old, and thrown into these roles of being put in charge of soldiers older than I was, being put in charge of millions of dollars worth of equipment as part of the Transportation Corps. A daunting challenge, but one that I was ready to tackle head on. And then a few months later, orders coming down that my unit, the 1st Cavalry Division, was going to deploy over to Iraq. So our vehicles went from that green color to the desert sand color. Our uniforms went from the green camo to the desert camo. And then a few months later, I found myself boarding a plane with thousands of my best friends. And we landed first in Kuwait. And you step off of the plane and the heat hits you, the weight of your equipment, and really just the magnitude of the moment. Driving down these barren desert landscape roads, looking across in the distance and realizing that the huts that we saw were people's homes, and just how different the day-to-day life was over there. Spending a few weeks in Kuwait before making the long road trip from Kuwait up into Iraq, and crossing that border and your heart starts to beat a little bit faster. Getting to the bustling city of Baghdad and there's just commotion everywhere, and do they want you there, do they not? Or really just wondering what your day-to-day life will be like. But eventually settling into a town of Taji, and it was gonna be our home for the next year, and settling into our new roles. I had 2 jobs over in Iraq. The first one was my favorite. I got to be a platoon leader, and I got to lead 20 of some of the finest men and women that I have ever known. A lot of them just out of high school, 18 years old, trying to find their way in the world. And they find themselves with me as their leader in this faraway land, but you become a family, that camaraderie stronger than ever. My second job was a convoy commander, so I'd be in charge of leading a whole bunch of vehicles from one point to the next, delivering various supplies, in charge of communications with headquarters, just kind of making sure everything went as it should. But in Iraq for 3 weeks. But I was a proud soldier, I was leading soldiers, I was carrying out missions. You just never think that a roadside bomb is gonna come into your own life, because things like that you think only happen to somebody else. But this time, it wasn't somebody else, it was me. And like out of a movie, I was lifted from the sands of Iraq, put in the back of this big military 5-ton style pickup truck, driven to the nearest aid station, put on a helicopter, and flown to the nearest American hospital. I was rushed into what I was later told was a life-saving surgery. And it wasn't until I woke up from that surgery and I looked to the surgeon next to me and I said, "Did something happen to my leg?" I still had no idea what had happened. And in his very blunt military way, he said, "Your leg is gone. You don't have it anymore." All these years later, I feel like what I should have asked him was, "Well, can you look again?" Because it seems surreal that in a second, an entire leg is gone. I had no choice in the matter. But instead, he handed me a phone, this big military-style phone, antenna on the top, and he said, "Would you like to call your parents?" Dialing up the phone, my mom answered. She was excited. She hadn't heard from me in a while. And I had to stop her pretty quickly and I'd say, Mom, something bad happened. Knowing that what she was about to hear was gonna break her world. And that's when the surgeon took the phone and told her that her youngest daughter had been severely wounded in a war. And the anguish of a mother as she screamed, "Don't let them take her leg," through the other end of the phone, but laying there on that stretcher with a leg that was already gone, and there was nothing any of us could do. And it's moments like that that stand out and stick out, and you never forget. But from this stretcher, in this emergency room, I had to move on. So first physically, and it I went from this Baghdad emergency room to the hospital in Rancho, Germany. And it just so happened that my dad was on business in Europe. My sister lived in Europe. So the day after this life-changing injury, I had 2 immediate family members rush into my hospital room to be by my side. Talk about starting things off with a team. Starting things off right, literally on the right foot. That's all I had left. You can laugh about that. It's funny. I'll wait. So spending a few days in Rancho before making the long trip back home, this time to Walter Reed Army Medical Center, which at the time was in Washington, D.C. And it was here where my mom met me. And my parents, again, once skeptical of me joining the military, and then proud, and now strong and steadfast by my side after the horror of that phone call. Oftentimes reassuring each other that things were gonna be okay. And when I was able to kind of come to and look around at my surroundings, I saw soldiers missing 2, 3, 4 limbs. They had lost their eyesight, they had traumatic brain injuries. And I looked at myself and I thought, holy cow, I'm the lucky one. 1 leg, that was it. And making a choice to live my life for those that no longer did, because too many continue to give and have given that ultimate sacrifice. And what made my time great at Walter Reed were the family and friends, Purple Heart, Bronze Star medals that you never expect to get, the ones that are proudly displayed in my home. But you can imagine, it's tough. I was 24 years old and laying there in that hospital bed wondering what my life would be like. Would I ever walk? Would I run? Would I lead an independent lifestyle? But lucky for me, they did whatever they could to help us pass the time. And we would have a lot of visitors. We would have high-ranking military officials, officers, celebrities, politicians. And I like to share my 2 favorites because they still stand out to me today. So one morning, I'd been at Walter Reed for a few weeks. The nurse comes in, she's really excited, and she's like, guess who you're gonna meet today? And I'm like, oh, who am I gonna meet? And she's like, super excited. A few hours later, I get a knock at my door. I look over, and who is standing there but Tom Hanks himself? He walks in, extremely genuine. We talk about him running in Forrest Gump. We talk about that volleyball named Wilson from the movie Castaway. And I'm on this like Tom Hanks high. And then a week later, knock, knock, knock. I look over, and who was standing at my door but the Osbournes? So they walk into the room. Sharon sits down on the bed. I have no clue how to small talk to Sharon Osbourne. Ozzy wanders around the room. There's a stack of chairs. He tries to climb them. They are lovely. They're also a little bit blurry, kind of like the picture, but I will forever be grateful of anyone that came to Walter Reed to let us know that what we had done mattered. I also learned that, as kind of silly as it may sound, that it's okay to celebrate the loss of a leg. So a lot of soldiers have what's called their Alive Day. So basically, every year on the day that they were injured, instead of mourning what they've lost, they celebrate what they still have. Pretty genius idea. Other than, let's say, your own birthday, when's the last time any of you took a moment to sit back and reflect on your life? Not the negative parts that we're so in tune to, but the good parts of it. A lot of times it's the little things that we take for granted, a roof over our head, a warm bed at night, food on the table. But we're so lucky to live the lives that we do. So loving this idea and deciding I was going to take it one step further, and I actually named what's left of my leg Little Leg. It's a leg that's little, so it made sense. And decided that every year we were going to have a birthday party for Little Leg. And this is my actual leg with a hat on that says life is good. And it's become this day that means more than my own birthday. It is about family and friends flying in. It is about celebrating not just Little Leg's life or my life, but everyone's life. And just taking a day to be thankful and grateful for the things that we have. But what I really wanted to do at this time was really to get my life back. So back at Walter Reed, down in physical therapy, regaining the strength I had lost after laying in that hospital bed for so long. And then the day came where I was fit with my very first prosthetic leg in this series of castings and measurements. And then a few days later, they hand you this piece of metal and plastic and they say, now this is your leg and you're gonna walk with this. I remember thinking, this is not my leg and how on earth am I gonna walk with this thing? Standing up in the parallel bars, looking across the physical therapy gym and seeing another veteran missing both of his legs and an arm. And guess what he was doing? He was walking. Perspective in life is everywhere. So what do? Well, you walk. First in the parallel bars, and then crutches, and then a cane, and then the day came where I realized that my life would go on. The only difference is every day I'd wake up, I'd put my prosthetic leg on, I'd go about my day just like all of you do. But as soon as I learned to walk, I wanted more. I had been an athlete when I was younger, and I would lay in my hospital bed and wondering, could I still be an athlete again? Could I feel the sweat on my face, the thrill of a finish line? So as exciting as learning to walk was, even more exciting is what I like to call the start of Melissa Stockwell 2.0. So there were these organizations whose missions were to come into the hospital and get us out doing things that we never thought we'd do with 2 legs, much less with 1. So it took every opportunity that presented itself. And before I knew it, I was out in New York City doing the New York City Marathon on a bike that I powered with my arms. 26 miles, crossing that finish line and realizing I could still be an athlete. And then a few weeks after this, going out to Colorado, and after growing up skiing on both legs, I was relearning how to ski on one leg, wobbly, falling everywhere. But by the end of the week, all the way up the chairlift, flying down the mountain, the wind in my face, and I had never felt so free. Going back to Walter Reed and thinking, if I can do that, I can do anything. And it came at the perfect time because someone came to the hospital, put a presentation on about the US Paralympics. And I sat in a room, a conference room, as this gentleman with a booming voice said, if you train hard enough, if you dedicate yourself to a sport, then you can compete on the world's biggest athletic stage as somebody with a disability. As a young gymnast who had dreamt of going to the Olympic Games, which obviously didn't happen, but I sat in this room realizing I had a second chance. I could represent a country I defended over in Iraq. I could wear that USA uniform, and what greater way to prove to myself that losing a leg wasn't gonna stop me. So leaving that room, knowing that somehow, some way, I wanted to be a Paralympian. But first, I was medically retired, went back to school in a new career field in the field of prosthetics, so getting other amputees fit with artificial limbs, and that reward of getting them back up on their feet and showing them what they could do. But this idea of being a Paralympian was always in the front of my mind. And I decided that I wanted to give it a shot in the sport of swimming. So if any of you are swimmers out there, you might agree that the water it almost has a healing effect. I would get in the water and almost forget as though I was missing a leg. And no, I don't swim in circles. And I also love the smell of chlorine. So it all made sense. But the Paralympics is not like the military. You don't just sign up and go. You have to beat your competitors. You have to make certain times. And my times were here. They had to come way down here if I had any shot of making it a reality. So I put everything on hold, moved out to the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs, where I swam, I ate, and I swam, and I swam. And almost 4 years to the day, after losing my leg, there was the Paralympic trials. This is where I had to showcase how fast I was. I had to beat my competitors, and I was a total long shot to make the team. But I learned a pretty cool lesson at these trials. Hard work, perseverance, it pays off. You guys know that. At this Paralympic trials, I took 20 seconds off a 400-meter freestyle, broke American records I didn't even know existed. I was so far from them. And at the end of this meet, my times put me high enough where when they named the team for the Paralympic Swim Team, and my name was on it. This whole journey from Baghdad to Beijing, it came full circle, and to me, it just made sense. So the next step was Beijing. And if any of you watched the Beijing Olympic Games, you might remember Michael Phelps. He won 8 gold medals in this water cube, this big structure that they built just for the Olympic and the Paralympic Games. So I got to watch Michael Phelps win his gold medals. And a few weeks later, I found myself in that water cube with my coach, imagining myself doing whatever I could to make my country proud. Taking 20 seconds off another 400-meter freestyle, because that was realistic, not really, but I could pretend. Swimming in a few different events in Beijing, and every day I would come out to the blocks with my crutches. I would look up into the stands and see my family and friends with a flag that said, Little Leg Fan Club. And I knew that whatever happened, that they were there for me. And I wish I could tell you that I did well athletically, but I didn't. And you have to realize that at the time, this was everything. This was my life. I didn't make best times, didn't make finals. And at the end of this meet, I felt like I had let everybody down. My family, my friends, my coaches, my country. At the end of the meet, I got a participation medal, which I wanted to chuck out the window at the time, because I thought I've come all this way, and that's all I got. But I learned a pretty great lesson. Life, I think, is all about lessons. We want to be on top. You want the medals. You want your hard work to pay off. You want the recognition. But it's not always about that. And at the end of the Paralympic Games, there's a closing ceremonies where an athlete is nominated by their peers to carry the American flag in and to represent all the Team USA athletes, typically reserved for someone who has much more than a participation medal. But when my teammates nominated me to be this flag bearer, I realized that it's about the journey. It's about the journey of overcoming obstacles that come your way that you never expect, having the heart to persevere through them. And a lot of times you end up even better on the other side. And this moment, carrying a flag so passionate about into a sold-out stadium, I think in life you kind of have these moments that you wish you can go back and relive again. And for me, that was one of them, just the meaning of it. So how do you beat that? How do you beat carrying the flag in? How do you beat competing in the Paralympic Games? Well, I did what most people would do, and I went back to work. Again, the field of prosthetics, and showing these other amputees firsthand that they could still get back out there and lead their normal life. But once you're an athlete, you're always an athlete. And soon after Beijing, I was invited to do a triathlon. And for those that are not familiar, a triathlon is where you swim, you bike, and you run, all in the same day, all in the same place, something I used to think only crazy people would want to do. But always up for a challenge, I said, sure, let's give it a shot. I flew out to California for my first triathlon. I swam, I biked, I ran. I crossed my finish line, and I was hooked. The challenge of all three sports, being on the same course as able-bodied athletes, the different prosthetic legs I had to wear. I would come in after the bike to get out on the run, and I would take one leg off, put the other one on. There's like legs everywhere. But I fell in love with it. And turns out I wasn't so bad at it. And for the next many years, able to travel around the nation, around the world, and crossing that finish line with that flag overhead never gets old. And then a few years later, wanting to kind of one-up myself and sign up for the elusive Ironman, which are for those that are a little bit crazy. You swim 2.4 miles, you bike over 100, you run a marathon, 26.2 miles, and you pay to do this thing. And for me, it wasn't about winning the race. It was about finishing it. Did I have that mental fortitude to get to that finish line? And the race is so long that you start when it's dark in the morning. So I started the swim and it was dark. I swam, I biked, I ran. I was on mile 20 of the run and it was dark again because I was been out there that long. Mile 20 of the run, and I was carrying glow sticks to see where I was going, and I was absolutely miserable, like wondering why I was doing this to myself. And I remember that I stopped and I thought, why am I doing this? And realizing that I was out there running for those that no longer could. Using that motivation to get to that finish line, flag overhead, and hear the words that I was an Ironman. And the realization on this day that we don't give ourselves enough credit on the things that we're capable of doing. If you get out there, if you try, it's amazing what you can accomplish. So it's been a wild ride. And I can honestly tell you that I have done more in my life with one leg than I ever would have done with two. The people I have met, the opportunities I have had. And true to word, every April 13th, we celebrate. Last year, we celebrated Little Leg's 20th birthday. And it's become this event where, Dad, we dance on the bar with my dad. I may or may not drink out of my leg, but that's for those that come to find out. But Little Leg's birthday is this day of celebration, of celebrating life, the little things that we forget, and just being grateful for what we have. And when I think back on the past many years, I have had some pretty incredible moments in my own life. I've been able to share a dance and ride a bike with George Bush on his ranch in Texas. Got a presidential kiss when I presented him with an American flag that flew over the Olympic Village. Been able to share a laugh with Michelle Obama when she was First Lady. Been able to share my story with some major news networks. This one, the Katie Couric show, on what was apparently Red Dress Day. Been able to give a fist bump to the legendary news anchor Tom Brokaw. Been able to stand in a room with, at the time, were all 5 living presidents on a day that wasn't about politics, as everything is these days, but it was about bringing both sides together. The honor of being asked to say the Pledge of Allegiance at the opening of a presidential library, and going home this evening just exuding patriotism, just so proud of where my story had brought me, and realizing that we're all different. Our views are different. Some of us are here, some of us are here, but we are under the same flag. And choosing that whatever that means, to continue to believe in all of us, in you, in the people that live here. Been able to present some Team USA gear to our former First Lady and President. But of all of these things, what I am most proud of is giving back. And back in Chicago, co-founding a group called Dare to Try, where we get athletes with physical disabilities into the sport of triathlon by taking away all the barriers, expensive adaptive equipment, the coaching, the training. We help youth, adults, injured service members get to that starting line, and when they get to that finish line, that is just the beginning for them. That self-worth, that self-confidence. Our motto is one inspires many, and it's one of my most professional accomplishments. And then, of course, on the personal side, my husband, Brian, my son, Dallas, my daughter, Millie, the dog, Murphy. And the joy of being a parent, the best and the hardest job in the world, as I'm sure many of you would agree with. But the joy of being a mom that looks a little bit different. And being able to show my kids firsthand that we all have something unique about us. Mine is much more visual, but you embrace what makes you unique, because that is what makes the world great. And it's my hope that my kids see me do that, and in turn they have big dreams of their own someday, and they run off and they get those dreams done. So I'm sure if any of you were to come up here and share your story, that you would have lessons that you've learned along the way. We all have lessons that we learn. And I've learned many along my journey as well. The first being is that life is short. It's short and it's fragile. And I think a lot of us realized that more than ever a few years ago when COVID turned our lives upside down. I've also learned that, as kind of as cliche as it may sound, is that dreams can come true. Because in September of 2016, mine did. I qualified for my second Paralympic Games in the sport of triathlon in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Of any day that my race could have taken place in Rio, the day was September 11th. You can imagine the meaning. Waking up in Rio, putting on that Team USA uniform, knowing that every swim stroke, every bike pedal, every run step, it wasn't just for me. It was for those that no longer could. Swimming, biking, and running up and down the streets of Copacabana Beach in Rio. coming across the finish line and getting a bronze medal that felt like a personal gold. On a historic day, because my teammates got gold and silver. It was a USA sweep on September 11th, and we stood on that podium seeing not one, not two, but 3 American flags go up as we heard our national anthem. Thinking about all those years ago in Iraq, someone tried to take my life. They didn't. They took my leg, but they did not take my spirit. My teammate, who lost her leg to cancer years prior, she did not let that stop her. Standing on that podium and showing the world the power of the American spirit and how much ability is in a disability. And this time, hugging my dad and my husband with tears of joy, just so proud to be there. And the best part about it was going home, putting the medal around my son's neck, and the culmination of the mommy road to Rio. And because we chose not to bring my son to Rio because he was too young, we did have these jumbo-sized heads made of him for my family and friends to bob around for that extra motivation. So I want to pause here just for a moment. And again, I want to share with all of you some things I've learned. And the goal is that you bring these with you. You carry them with you today. You think about them, apply them to your own life. The first is the power of a team. So I've been fortunate enough to experience teamwork in all aspects of what I do. In the military, teamwork resonates in everything that we do. Nothing says it more. On April 13th, my teammate, my soldier, he saved my life. When I was on that podium in Rio, it wasn't just me up there. It was family, it was friends, it was everyone that got me there. You need your team more than ever. People that you can call when days are hard, because they can be hard, but they can be so good. And the people you can call to celebrate with those smallest of victories, because we are really all in this life together. I've also realized that we don't give ourselves enough credit on the things that we're capable of doing. If you would have told me years ago, so guess what, Melissa? You're gonna go to a war, you're gonna lose your leg, you're gonna have this incredible family, you're gonna be a Paralympian, you're gonna share your story, I would have thought, whoa, like no way is that gonna happen. Like no way am I gonna be here in Rancho Mirage telling you guys all this. But I'm doing it. What it took for me was losing a leg to kind of have this pocket of potential that I always had. I just had to kind of reach a little bit further in. So the question to all of you is, how do you skip losing the leg part and find your own potential? Well, you start by believing that you can, and it sounds so simple, but it's so powerful. When you come up upon a situation and you think, oh, there is no way I can do that. You turn the narrative around and you think, actually, I can do that. And you fill in that I can do blank moment in with whatever your Paralympic moment may be. You can do it, you just have to try. So a few years ago, my husband and I wanted to open our own prosthetic business. Opening a business is hard, it's scary, but we went for it. We opened the doors, and about a month later, COVID hit. Not ideal, but we not only made it through, but we have helped hundreds of patients get back to their normal life. But we never would have done that had we not tried. It's scary to try new things. Change is hard, but get out there and do it, because you never know until you do. So this picture of me is of my lowest of lows. This was in that Baghdad emergency room. That T on my forehead stood for tourniquet. So if anyone found me, they knew that I had been severely wounded. But when I look at this T now, for me it stands for turning point, because this was the turning point of my life. The day I realized that you can't stop the things that happen to you. I couldn't stop the fact that a roadside bomb hit my vehicle. I don't think anybody would have doubted me if I said, oh, woe is me, I lost my leg. But instead I chose to say, all I lost is a leg. Now let's get back to living. And I am proud that I have done just that. There's been 2 other Paralympic Games, Tokyo 2021, thanks to COVID, and Paris just this last summer. And you look at the pictures of Tokyo where there's no spectators except for these jumbo-sized heads that silently cheered us on. But then you look at these pictures of me coming down the finish line, you think, oh my gosh, I'm so happy. Did I win? Was I on the podium? Well, the answer is no. I was 5th in the Tokyo Paralympic Games. 1 month before this exact moment at that finish line, I was on a training bike ride, training for this race, hit a branch, I flew off my bike, I hit a tree, and I fractured my back. The doctors kept telling me it was the best place to break a back, things you never think you're gonna hear a doctor say. I didn't need surgery, I just had to rest. Rest is the last thing I wanted to do 1 month before a race I trained 5 years for. But like anything in life, I had a choice. I could still be on that blue carpet, that finish line in Tokyo. Expectations changed a little bit, but choosing just to be in the moment, not to think about yesterday, not to think about tomorrow, just to be there. And then, just a few months ago in Paris, swimming, biking, and running up and down the iconic streets of Paris. Yes, I did swim in the Seine River, and yes, I did live to tell about it. But choosing again just to live in the moment, and this time having my husband, my kids there, hearing those "Go, Mommy, Go" cheers, having my son be the one to hand me that finish line flag before I finished, coming across the finish line in 5th place, but being the realization that I was 44 years old, a mother of 2, 4th Paralympic Games, and I was so proud that I was 5th in the world. The power, thank you. It's the power of choice. That is what it is. And it's been so applicable in my own life that I wrote this book about it, which is why I'm here. And the idea is that the reader reads this book and they apply these things in more detail to their own lives. And they finish it realizing that they can do whatever it is that they want to do. It's my sincere hope that none of you ever encounter a real roadside bomb. But there are metaphoric ones that are truly all around us. COVID was one of them. Loss of a loved one is one. Loss of a pet, divorce, things you can't often change. But what you can do is know that the sun will rise tomorrow. What you can do is find these small silver linings in them, whatever they are, because I promise you, they are there. And realizing that every time we do encounter one of those metaphoric roadside bombs and we end up okay, the next one gets just a little bit easier, knowing the strength that all of us have. So the next time something doesn't go your way, which will happen, might be as you walk out of this room today, might be in the business world, family world, whatever it may be, how are all of you going to choose your own power of choice? How are all of you going to choose to rise up and to live the life that all of us deserve to live? Thank you.